Well, now we are moving to the last part of this module, which is about land policy monitoring and evaluation. Why do we discuss monitoring and evaluation of land policy? First, monitoring and evaluation is instrumental to successful land policy implementation. It's an important process for measuring and assessing the performance of projects, programs, and institutions, including in the land sector. However, monitoring and evaluation of land policy is still at an embryonic development stage in Africa. Most monitoring and evaluation systems are designed mainly for the purpose of monitoring donor projects. So we have experiences on monitoring donor projects, but limited capacity and knowledge when it comes to monitoring land policy processes. What are the key objectives of land policy monitoring and evaluation? Monitoring and evaluation of land policy aims at providing an opportunity to learn from successes as well as from failures, and also to share best practices. Another objective of monitoring and evaluation of land policy is to allow governments to make timely readjustment to land policy implementation processes and allow them to take appropriate measures for effectiveness, efficiency of the process. Sometimes you'll just implement the land policy and realize that some aspects of the implementation process are not the right approach. So it's very important to understand this timely and take immediately the needed actions. Monitoring and evaluation of land policy helps governments to improve the quality of knowledge. I would say governments and other stakeholders to improve the quality of knowledge and develop capacities on land governance. The monitoring and evaluation of land policy also provides a basis for consolidating participation and stakeholder engagement in the implementation process. Remember that we insisted that in most cases, participation is clearly considered at the stage of land policy development, but when it comes to implementation, it's usually considered that this is a business for land administration agents. So the stakeholders, other stakeholders has nothing to do during the implementation phase. So monitoring and evaluation will provide a good basis for a continuous engagement of stakeholder participation. Monitoring and evaluation of land policy will also build trust with development partners and facilitate resource mobilization. monitoring and evaluation enable governments to identify and then manage emerging land issues. So you can see that there are a lot of benefits of having a monitoring and evaluation system for the land policy process. Some of the very important challenges of monitoring and evaluating land policies relates to the methodology. In this regard, I will first insist on the need to build consensus on what needs to be tracked. Consensus of what needs to be tracked shouldn't be left only to experts on monitoring and evaluation. It's a concern also for all stakeholders. So, what are the key elements of the land policy which need to be tracked? For example, is it the number of titled issues issued? Is it about women's access to land? Is it about the performance of land delivery services? Is it about the level of stakeholder participation in the land policy process, etc.? So, very important to build consensus on what needs to be tracked. These questions will form the basis for indicator development and for data gathering. Second aspect related to the methodology is about defining quality indicator in a participatory manner. Usually, indicators will be developed by monitoring and evaluation experts. However, the initial design of indicators by experts should be disseminated in order to gather feedback from stakeholders. The feedback obtained should be used to improve and finalize the indicators. So this is an important way of engaging stakeholders in the definition of indicators. Another methodological challenge relates to the resistance to monitoring and evaluation processes. Usually, the monitoring and evaluation system could be in place, but you'll face resistance from internal stakeholders, mainly within the land administration agents. A good approach to overcoming this kind of resistance is to promote a positive perception of monitoring and evaluation, and therefore promoting or facilitating adherence of land administration agents to the monitoring and evaluation process. The key message to be conveyed is that monitoring and evaluation is not a control process. It's a learning process, and it's about creating an opportunity for improving the implementation process of the land administration, of the land policy. Sometimes you'll need to combine the internal tracking mechanism with independent or external systems. We already mentioned that there is limited capacity in monitoring and evaluation of land policy. So you need to build capacity for monitoring and evaluation of land policy. Because the existing experience and expertise relates mainly to monitoring and evaluation of project, not monitoring and evaluation of land policy development and implementation processes. Training programs at different levels should systematically integrate monitoring and evaluation of land policy. That's how you can build capacity on monitoring and evaluation of land policy in a sustainable manner. There is need to extend capacity building programs to local levels in line with decentralization trends of land administration. Quite all countries today have decided to decentralize the land administration system. So you cannot just build capacity at higher level, you need to build capacity also at local level, at the level of the local governments where land will be effectively managed and administered. There is this call we already made for budgetary allocation to resource and resource mobilization. This should include monitoring and evaluation of land policy. The resources to be mobilized for the implementation process should take into consideration the need for monitoring and evaluation of the land policy process. And we might also need to mobilize technical assistance from external experts, at least at an early stage of the process, the time local capacities are developed. The consensus building should also include consensus around key concepts of monitoring and evaluation. What are we talking about? What does it mean to develop indicators? What does it mean, a baseline data, and so on? It's very important that all stakeholders at least share minimum understanding of the key concepts, otherwise they cannot continue participating in the monitoring and evaluation process. We already highlighted the need to build consensus on what is to be monitored. What stakeholders need to know about what is to be tracked in the monitoring and evaluation system? What are the tracking areas to be considered? Usually, you need to derive the areas to be tracked from a thorough and sharp review of the land policy itself. So you need to review the land policy and identify the key areas where there is need for tracking. Building consensus around monitoring and evaluation is to be done from the starting point of the process, because it will lead to popular adherence to the land policy objectives. It will ensure continuous engagement of the people in the land policy implementation process, and it will enhance accountability of land policy implementers. How do we design the monitoring and evaluation system? But first, what is a monitoring and evaluation system? The monitoring and evaluation system is a set of tools, including indicators, a set of tools and processes that will be used to measure change and progress in land policy implementation. There is no unique or uniform or model monitoring and evaluation system. The system should be developed to fit the context and need of the specific country. And as we already mentioned, a best practice consists in multi-stakeholder consultations about what needs to be tracked, what stakeholders need to know about the land policy implementation process. Consultation is key. We know that designing a monitoring and evaluation system can be complex and difficult to achieve. That's why it's usually recommended to build on and adapt mechanisms which are already existing in other fields. For example, you can borrow from mechanisms in the field of monitoring and evaluating the Agenda 2063, the SDGs, or also borrowing from mechanisms resulting from national land observatories. So it's difficult to build a system, but it's recommended to build from existing systems. Indicators development is a critical aspect of monitoring and evaluation of land policy. Indicators are at the heart of the monitoring and evaluation systems because they are the tools that will be used to measure the change in the land policy process or the progress achieved in land policy implementation. The indicators to be developed can be quantitative or qualitative. Quantitative indicators are focused on what can be counted, while qualitative indicators focus on documenting the perception of stakeholders. In cases, indicators need to be quality tools, meaning tools which allow measurement of change in land policy. It's important to recall that the indicators that are developed should match the question which has been identified as priority questions that need to be answered. Best practices include consultation around the validation of selected indicators. It's also advisable to have limited and manageable number of indicators. And finally, using standard indicators can be very helpful because they are already developed and developed in a very good manner. So they are already well defined. So it's good to just borrow and adapt already existing indicators. I'm sure you already heard about SMART indicators. Quality indicators should be SMART. SMART is kind of a concept with S for specific, M for measurable, A for achievable, R for realistic, and T for time bound. The S for specific. A specific indicator is clear about what is to be measured. It targets a specific area for measurement. M for measurable. A measurable indicator can be quantified or qualified. A for achievable. The indicator will allow the measurement of the change or progress given the available time and resources. Realistic. The indicator can be reasonably and easily implemented. And T for time bound. The indicator provides an indication of when the result will be achieved. By such time, for example, this can be achieved. So indicators should be SMART. Let's now discuss the issue of data, which is critical in most African countries. First, it's important to understand that the sources of data are diverse. You'll find the needed data in government institutions like ministries, land administration agencies, and others. But you'll also find in research institutions, you'll find in civil society organizations, and you can also find with development partners. So it's good to have a broad approach of the sources of data. Otherwise, you might miss very important data which are hosted in non-conventional places. It's also important to anticipate the culture of secrecy, which is well shared by most African government institutions. We all know that it's very difficult to access data from government institutions. It's a matter of habits to consider that data is should be kept confidential, while it shouldn't. It should be accessible by citizens. This is part of land governance. Sometimes we'll lack the data because they are not collected in a systematic manner. So it could have been possible to gather the data, but they have not been collected systematically, so it becomes very difficult to access such data. In other cases, the data will exist, but they are not managed adequately. So it's difficult to access data which are not managed. It's important to be very selective in data collection. Focus on data which are relevant to document the indicators and not developing as many data as available. It's also advisable to feed periodically the system with relevant data. That will make access to data really more efficient. It's important to use the M&E system as a learning opportunity. Monitoring and evaluation is not just about control, it's about also learning. You'll generate learning through the feedback you get from the monitoring and evaluation process. You'll adjust the monitoring process as needed as you are implementing it. And it's also important to share the outcome of the monitoring and evaluation process as widely as possible for use by all stakeholders. For example, research institutions can make very effective and efficient use of the outcome of monitoring and evaluation processes. CSOs can also benefit from the outcome of monitoring and evaluation process. This also includes development partners who will benefit from the outcome of the monitoring and evaluation process. But more importantly, the use of the outcome of the monitoring and evaluation process should help decision makers to improve the land policy process itself and help government to make timely adjustment to the policy implementation process, and also give them the opportunity to generalize best practices. You can also feed training programs with key findings and outcomes of the monitoring and evaluation process. So it's very important to also have in mind that the monitoring and evaluation process is a huge learning opportunity. I would like to finish this discussion on monitoring and evaluation through giving you the example of what ALPC has done through a project called the MELA project. MELA standing for Monitoring and Evaluation of Land Governance in Africa. The focus area of the MELA project, which has been initiated by the ALPC, is to track the implementation of the AU Declaration on Land. This project is being developed through a partnership, a technical partnership with IFPRI. It's a 2-year project which was scheduled to take place from January 2017 to December 2018. And it was scheduled to be implemented in 10 pilot countries. We'll be back to the pilot countries later. The major expected outcome of the MELA project was knowledge in land policy development and implementation processes. And second outcome, expected outcome, capacity and tracking land policy development and implementation improved and sustained. What are the key objectives of the MELA project? There are 4 objectives. 1, to develop a comprehensive baseline database that will form the basis for future tracking of progress in implementing the AU Declaration on Land in Africa. 2, to track progress made in policy development and implementation over the past 7 years. 3, to document and disseminate best practices in policy development and implementation with a view to informing policy processes in Africa. And 4, to build and sustain the capacity of member states to ensure regular tracking and periodic reporting to AU summits of progress made in land policy development and implementation. So great objectives for the MELA project. Let me come back to the 10 pilot countries. The 10 pilot countries was selected based on the following criteria. 1, strong high-level political commitment. 2, regional balance, meaning that there is need to cover the whole continent, the whole regions. 3, ongoing land policy development processes and land reform processes. 4, the stage and progress of land policy process. 5, the existing engagement with ALPC and LPI at country level. And lastly, the availability of data. So these are the criteria that were used to select 10 pilot countries. The pilot countries are the following. You can see look at the table. In West Africa, you have Cote d'Ivoire, Niger, and Nigeria. In Central Africa, you have mainly DRC. In Eastern Africa, you have Rwanda, Tanzania, Uganda. And in Southern Africa, you have Madagascar, Malawi, and Zambia. So these are the 10 countries. You will note that you'll notice that Central Africa has only one country. It also reflects the fact that not much is happening in Central Africa in terms of land policy reforms. The project was organized in 5 key phases. Phase 1 was a preparatory phase. Phase 2 was the inception phase. Phase 3 was focusing on data collection. Phase 4 on country reports. And phase 5 on synthesis and best practices. Oh, sorry, it's 6. Phase 6 is about developing training materials from the process. I'm giving you here examples of other monitoring and evaluation initiatives. This is the Madagascar Land Observatory. Observatoire du Foncier in Madagascar. It was one of the most effective and efficient land observatory. Many countries have land observatories. There were an initiative for establishing a regional land observatory in West Africa, but it never was realized, in fact. What is the missions of the Madagascar Land Observatory? 1, to generate information on progress of the land reform. 2, to produce analysis, reflections, and engage government. The Madagascar Land Observatory was producing a lot of briefs, policy briefs, study reports, papers, videos on the land reform process. And 3rd, to draw lessons from key successes and failures with a view to feeding the land policy process. These are really very good missions that can be borrowed from other countries across the continent. So that's the end of this module. I hope you enjoyed it. It's a very important module. We went through the concept of land policy. I hope you got it clearly what land policy is. And also that we went through land policy development, land policy implementation, and monitoring and evaluation of land policy. Thanks for your attention.